Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're digging into literally the most famous cold case in aviation history. And you know, what's truly mind-blowing about this story is that it isn't just some dusty, closed chapter from a history book. Incredibly, it's an active, ongoing search right now. As we speak, in July 2026, we are looking at an absolute trailblazer who is on the brink of completing the greatest flight in aviation history, only to just vanish without a trace. So let's dive right in.
Just listen to these words for a second. We are on the line 157-337. Wait. These were the very last words ever heard from Amelia Earhart. It was 8:43 a.m. on July 2nd, 1937. And after she said wait, there was nothing but silence. Forever. But to truly understand the gravity of that silence and the massive void her disappearance left in the world, we first need to look at exactly who she was before she vanished into the Pacific.
Section 1. A Legend Takes Flight. The woman who completely refused to accept limits.
Before we look at how she disappeared, we really have to understand the monumental global icon we lost. Earhart was someone who completely shattered barriers, dominating the skies in a world that was overwhelmingly run by men. Born in Kansas in 1897, she was hooked literally from her first flying lesson at age 23. By 1928, she's making global headlines, crossing the Atlantic as a passenger, but honestly, that just wasn't enough for her. She wanted to do it alone. So in 1932, she becomes the first woman to fly solo nonstop across the Atlantic, which actually earned her the Distinguished Flying Cross from Congress. Fast forward to 1935, and Purdue University brings her on as a consultant, gifting her this state-of-the-art flying laboratory, the Lockheed Electra 10E, the very same plane she would ultimately disappear in. Her ultimate ambition? It was staggering. A 29,000-mile flight all the way around the equator. Just look at this progress. By late June 1937, she and her incredibly experienced navigator, Fred Noonan, had already completed over 22,000 miles. South America, Africa, India, Southeast Asia, done. Only this treacherous 2,556-mile final Pacific leg stood between Earhart and absolute aviation immortality.
But here's the catch. To survive that final stretch, Earhart and Noonan had to find their refueling point, a place called Howland Island. And guys, this was a tiny 2-mile-long sliver of land in the middle of the vast Pacific Ocean. Finding it required flawlessly precise navigation. They were basically looking for a needle in the world's largest haystack. The U.S. Coast Guard cutter, the Itasca, was stationed nearby to act as a radio guide, but the margin for error? It was practically zero.
Moving on to Section 2. The final radio transmission. Into the dark over the Pacific.
Let's walk through those final, fateful hours. It's 10 p.m. on July 1st. They take off from New Guinea into the pitch black of night. For hours, radio contact with the Itasca is completely sporadic. As morning approaches, visibility is terrible. And you can just feel the tension rising as Earhart's transmissions become increasingly urgent. She's reporting they're running low on fuel and they just cannot see the island. Worse, we now know they were broadcasting on mismatched frequencies, meaning Earhart and the Itasca were really struggling to even hear each other. Finally, at 8:43 a.m., she gives her last coordinate line, and then total silence.
$4 million. When Earhart vanished, the United States launched the largest and most expensive search operation in its history at the time. The Navy and Coast Guard frantically scoured 250,000 square miles of open ocean. But despite this massive effort and unimaginable cost, absolutely no trace of the aircraft, the pilots, or any debris was ever found. Ultimately, Earhart was officially declared dead in 1939.
Which brings us to Section 3. Theory 1. Ocean depths. This is the most widely accepted scientific explanation.
So, why didn't she find the island? Well, the answer might be this shocking number right here, 5.8. Get this, in November 2025, the U.S. National Archives released thousands of newly declassified records. And buried in those pages was a breathtaking revelation. The charted position of Howland Island on Earhart's map may have been off by 5.8 nautical miles. An error of that magnitude, an error she was never warned about, could absolutely explain why she flew right past her target.
And if she crashed because of a map error, she went down into a terrifyingly hostile environment. The water in that specific area of the Pacific is over 17,000 feet deep. At that crushing depth, finding a 1930s aircraft is incredibly difficult, even with today's best technology. Actually, a 2024 sonar suite by a group called Deep Sea Vision thought they had finally found the plane, but when they went back for a closer look, it turned out to just be a rock formation.
All right, Section 4, castaway or captured, the completely unproven but honestly fascinating alternate possibilities. Because no confirmed wreckage has ever been found in the deep, alternative theories have really thrived over the years. The Nuka castaway theory suggests they didn't crash into the water at all, but instead made an emergency landing on an uninhabited reef about 350 miles away. And consider the evidence they left behind. Human bones discovered in 1940, which a 2017 analysis showed matched Earhart's measurements closer than 99% of the population. Plus, a 1930s woman's shoe, a jar of freckle cream, and most recently, the Terraria object, an anomaly shaped exactly like an aircraft wing spotted in the island's lagoon via satellite in 2020. Pretty eerie, right?
Now, on the flip side of the castaway theory is the much more controversial Japanese capture theory. This one suggests Earhart was forced down near the Marshall Islands, captured for suspected espionage, and ultimately died on Saipan. This is fueled entirely by accounts from local Saipan natives, along with a 1960 newspaper article found in those same 2025 declassified files where an Army sergeant claims he saw unmarked graves in 1944 belonging to Earhart and Noonan. Now, while it makes for a fascinating story, most historians consider this theory highly unlikely just due to a total lack of hard physical evidence.
And that brings us to Section 5, the search in 2026, an active investigation nearly a century later. The momentum to finally solve this case is literally at an all-time high. Look at this timeline. In 2024, we had those Deep Sea Vision sonar scans. Then in 2025, President Donald Trump formally directed the declassification and release of all government records related to Earhart, which prompted this ongoing flood of new archival data. And now, in 2026, we have a brand new, highly anticipated expedition setting out for Nukamoro. In fact, right now, literally as we speak, in late July 2026, searchers are out in the Pacific. A team is departing from Majuro in the Marshall Islands to spend 5 days on Nukamoro. Their primary mission? To get right into that lagoon and investigate the Terraria object directly. They are actively hoping to pull a piece of the Lockheed Electra out of the water this very week.
Which leaves us with this final, lingering question. Nearly 90 years later, is the Pacific finally ready to give up its greatest secret? Amelia Earhart was a trailblazer who refused to accept the limits placed on her by society and gravity alike. She captured our imaginations in life, and her disappearance has held the world spellbound for 9 decades. Will this active 2026 expedition be the one that finally brings Amelia Earhart home? What do you think? Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredible explainer, and definitely keep your eyes on the news, because this mystery might just be getting its final chapter.